What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best Witchhunter builds in Path of Exile 2. If you are looking for any of these builds on the website, then click my link in the description or the pinned comment. So this is an endgame build that is structured around using Explosive Shot, which will proc a bunch of buffs like Herald of Thunder, Herald of Ice and Herald of the Ash, which will all create massive explosions and give you the ability to clear entire screens of enemies in just a second or two. But as we will lack in single target damage, so for that reason we are going to be also using the shock burst rounds that will delete bosses insanely quickly. However, because of this we will now have to use the 3 Jagged Mask, which will now make our explosive shots contribute to the shock instead of ignite, and this will completely solve our low single target damage and make our build not only insane for AoV but also against tough bosses. So let me show you the build, and for the main class I'm going with the Mercenary and our ascendancy is the Witchhunter. Then for the first skill we have the Explosive Shot with the support gem like the Scatter Shot, Conduction, Martial Tempo, Fire Penetration and the Lightning Exposure. Then second we get the Shock Burst rounds with the Lightning Infusion, Concentrated Effect, Heft, Primal Armament and the Fresh Clip. Then next we get the Emergency Reload with Premeditation, Ingenuity and Persistence. Next we have the Sorcery Ward with the Fire Mastery and the Lightning Infusion. Next we got the Herald of Ice with Magnified Effect, Cold Infusion, Cold Penetration and Cold Mastery. Next we got Overwhelming Presence with no support gems. Next we got Herald of the Thunder with Innervate, Lightning Penetration, Ice Bite and Glaciation. Then for some of the last ones we have the Herald of the Ash and Voltaic Mark, and for both of them we don't want to use any gems. And finally for the last one we got the Wind Dancer with the Blind, Maim and Unbreakable. Most of this setup is structured around using our explosive shots to delete enemies in split seconds, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their size and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this projectile damage node, and then go like this while getting these 4. So Battle Harden, Feel No Pain, Remorseless and Ricochet. Then from here we keep on moving while also taking this whole thing. Then next we now go to the right side and get these 2. So Adrenaline Rush and Instant Reload. Then afterwards we want to keep on going down while taking these 2. So Emboldened Avatar and the Forces of Nature. While also getting these 2 more, so Flash Storm and Lightning Rod. And then from here you want to get all of these here as well. And only from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. All of these nodes that we got are very useful, but the ones I mentioned have the top priority, as they're the most important ones to acquire early on in the game, to make our build functional, and then later on the priority doesn't really matter that much. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock Pitiless Killer. This will instantly kill enemies if their life reaches a certain threshold. Then second we get the Judge, Jury and Executioner. This will now give us a Decimating Strike, which will remove between 5 to 30% of enemies' health before your first attack. Then next we get the Obsessive Ritual. This will add the Sorcery Ward to your skill, an Elemental Damage Barrier at the cost of 50% less armor and evasion rating. This barrier will now absorb elemental damage and up to 30% of your armor and evasion rating, so this trade-off is 100% worth it. And then finally we want to go with the Ceremonial Ablution, which will now buff the effect and recovery of our Sorcery Ward even further. So feel free to use this exact same path as we have right here. And don't forget to check this video description to find the link for this website, and this should make it easier for you to follow the path. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus passives that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. So when we start we want to first of all go to the right side and get all of these nodes, and then keep going down until you get to this keystone called the Deadly Evolution. And then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this we have also sub-passives, and their order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter. So this time it's up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium. Then third we have the bosses. Then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Expert Forlorn Crossbow. I chose this one because of one simple fact, which is that this is the highest DPS crossbow in the game. So then for bonus stats we also want to go with increased physical damage, adds physical damage to attacks, and loads an additional bolt, which is a huge buff, so try to prioritize this one for sure. Then for the helmet we have the Tree Dragon Mask, and as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the only required item for this build to work at 100%. So if you can find it, then just buy it and believe me, it will be 100% worth it. And this mask will now make our explosive shots contribute to the shock instead of ignite, and this will completely solve our low single target damage. Then for the chest we have the Expert Serpent Scale Coat with evasion, and for more stats we got even more evasion, max life, and chaos and lightning resistance. Then for the belt we have the utility belt with 20% faster flask recovery, and for more we got max life, more to charm slots, as well as cold and fire resistance. Then for gloves we got the Expert Spin Bracers with evasion, and for more we want adds physical damage to attacks, max life, increased attack speed, and leech off physical attack damage as mana. Then for boots we're using the Expert Lizard Scale Boots with evasion, and for more we need increased movement speed, evasion, max life, as well as fire and cold resistance. Then for our first and second ring we got the same one called the Amethyst Ring with the chaos resistance, and for more we want adds physical damage to attacks, max life, and lightning resistance. And then finally for the amulet we have the Bloodstone Amulet with max life, and for more we got more to spirit, even more to max life, and fire resistance. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is the best case scenario setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work, and I will give you 2 rotations. So first up we have AoV farming, and for this one we simply want to spam our explosive shots, and almost for every content these big AoV explosions should take care of the most enemies, as we have stacked the Herald of the Thunder, Herald of the Ice, and Herald of the Ash for massive buffs. And then for single targets, this time we want to start by applying our Voltaic Mark to increase our chance to shock and its effect, and then afterwards we use explosive shot until our target becomes shocked. Then when that happens, then now we use our shock burst rounds until they go on cooldown, and then afterwards use emergency reload for quick buffs, and then again keep on continuing spamming our shock burst rounds until the shock wears off, or if the enemy completely gets destroyed. This setup's main focus is built around the Galvanic shards and the Shockbuster rounds, that both act as the shotgun skills, which as you can see from the gameplay can melt a ton of enemies in split seconds. This is currently for sure the best mercenary build in the game, as not only you can do massive amounts of damage, but also in the endgame with decent enough gear you can reach about 15,000 shield, which will turn you into an unstoppable melting machine. Our playstyle is built around the shock and the chain lightning, as Galvanic shards have an amazing clear speed, coming from the chains and the forks. Then the shock burst rounds have an insane single target damage, but will require shock, so that's why we consistently use the Stormcaller arrow, to get that crazy AoE buff and much more. If you want to use the crossbow as a shotgun and destroy enemies in seconds, then this is the one for you. So let me show you the build, and for the main class I have chosen to go with the mercenary, and our ascendancy is the Witchhunter. Then for the first skill we have the Galvanic shards with support gem called the Martial Tempo, Fork, Primal Armament, and Long Shot. Then second we got the Shockbuster rounds with concentrated effect, Lightning Infusion, Heft, and Elemental Focus. Then next we got the Stormcaller arrow with the Conduction, Fast Forward, Overcharge, and the Lightning Exposure. And next we have the Emergency Reload with Ingenuity and Premeditation. Next up we have the Herald of the Thunder with Vitality, Cannibalism, and Innervate. Next we got the Cast on Shock with Voltaic Mark, Conductivity, Persistence, and Impetus. Then for one of the last ones we have the Ripfire Ballista with Font of Rage, Font of Blood, and Ancestral Urgency. And finally for the last one we are using the Sorcery Ward with Lightning Mastery, Fire Mastery, and the Cold Mastery. Most of this setup is structured around using the Galvanic shards in the Shock Burst rounds to delete enemies in seconds, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their size and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you're interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this armor and evasion node, then go like this until we get a battle hardened, feel no pain, and a hard to kill. Next we want to keep moving forwards and get this whole thing, as well as this quick change act. Next up we want to go all the way to the end, and now move to the right and get both these lightning nodes, called the lightning rod and the flash storm. Next up we want to circle back a little, and this time go to the left, all the way to here until we get to the resolute technique. And this keystone is very important, which I will explain in just a second. And then from here we can go back all the way from where we left off, and then just keep going right, and from this point just unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Obsessive Rituals, then next get Ceremonial Abolition, then third we want the Zealous Inquisition, and then finally we want to go with the Pitiless Killer. Next up we have the Atlas passives, and the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus passives that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. Our mercenary build is also great at single target DPS, so we can also spend a bit of points into the farming boss maps or the essences. So when we start we want to first of all get to the bottom left side like this. Then from here we go until we get all the way to this keystone called the Deadly Evolution. Then next we get back to the middle and this time take the top right side and get all of these passives. And then when all of these are done, then now we go again back to the middle. And this time take the middle path and unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Expert Forlorn Crossbow with crit and weapon speed. Our main goal here is to get a high DPS or hybrid physical and lightning damage setup. Also, a fast attack speed and low reload time is important as well. And for bonus stats we want physical damage, lightning damage, attack speed, life per enemy hit, and plus levels to all projectile skills. Then for the helmet we have the Expert Shielded Helm with armor and evasion, and for bonus stats we got increased armor and evasion, then even more armor, even more evasion and max life. Then for chest we have the Expert Scale Mail with the armor and evasion, and for bonuses we want increased armor and evasion, even more evasion rating and max life. Then for the belt we have the Plate Belt with a lot of armor and max life. As I mentioned at the beginning, we can get up to 15,000 armor, and as we are using the leather bound gauntlets node, that gives us even more evasion per every single armor stat, so this is incredibly useful for our build. Then for the gloves we got the Expert Molded Mitts with armor, and for more we need even more increased armor, max life and increased attack speed. Then for boots we're using the Expert Stack Sabotons with the armor and evasion, and for more we got increased movement speed, max life and increased armor and evasion. Then for our first ring we got the Death Rush. The main goal here is to find rings with added lightning damage, or if not then physical damage is also fine. However, this one is not mandatory, and you can choose other rings as well. But if you're looking for the best one in the slot, then this one for sure is the best, as it gives us insane amount of evasion and accuracy. Then also 5% life leech, and we also gain onslaught after every kill. While on the second one we have the Amethyst ring with chaos resistance, and for more we want lightning damage and max life. And then finally for the amulet we got the Lapis amulet with intelligence, and for more we want spirit, armor, max life, even more chaos resistances, and plus levels to all projectile skills. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. Then next we have runes. During early item progression, most gear is socketed with resistant runes, like the Desert Rune, Glacial Rune or the Storm Rune. However, once your elemental resistances have been capped and elemental resistances are no longer necessary, then you want to opt in to increase your maximum life with body runes or consider socketing a soul core. So on our weapon we are using the Iron Rune. Then on the helmet we have the Glacial Rune, and then lastly on the rest of our equipment we are using the Storm Rune. And now finally let's quickly take a look at how this build will work, and I will give you 2 distinct rotations. So one for mapping / AoV mob farming, and then the second one for bosses. So first up we have our AoV rotation, and for most weak enemies you can just simply use the Galvanic shards by themselves, and it will already destroy 99% of the most enemies. However, if you run into a big stronger pack, then we again start with the Galvanic shards to proc them, but then afterwards use the shock burst rounds and blast them down even further. And then finally, if they're very tanky, then you can also use the emergency reload for bigger damage boost, but this will really depend on each situation separately. Or then for the second one, we got our boss rotation, and this time we want to use the Stormcaller arrow to start proccing our shock. Then next we want to use the shock burst rounds with the emergency reload, and this combo should completely obliterate any monster. And then lastly, we can also use the Ripwire Ballista before the boss spawns to get some extra free rage, but again, this is very optional. This setup is very unique because we are going to be freezing enemies with the Permafrost bolts, which will give us frost fires, so then we will be able to drop explosive grenades that can detonate, and with the explosive shots we will do massive amounts of damage. This build is great against bosses and other large enemy groups, as we can CC the enemy while our fuse is going on, and then we can detonate our AoE skills and clear anything and everything in our way. So let's move over to the build. When you get to it, you want to pick the Witchhunter Ascendancy, but if you're leveling, then the basic mercenary class will work as well. And first we have our skills. So for the main spell we have the crossbow shot with no support gems. Then second we got the Permafrost bolts with support gems like the Glaciation, then the Ice Bite and also the Deep Freeze. We chose this skill because we want to push hard into the freezing effect, so then once we freeze our enemies, we can then drop a huge ignite on them with explosive grenade and do a huge amount of DPS. Then next we got the explosive grenade with support gems like the Frostfire, Concentrated Effect, Primal Arraignment, Eternal Flame and Searing Flame. This skill just got a huge buff in 80% physical to fire damage converter, so this will give us big ignites on the bosses and provide our build with fast clearing speed. Next we have Explosive Shot with support gems like the Wildfire and the Nimble Reload. Then next we have the Herald of the Ash with support gems such as the Clarity, Vitality and Precision. Then for Flash Grenade we got one support gem called Brutality. Then for high velocity rounds we have the Scattered Shot and Double Barrel. And then finally for our Galvanic shards we got support gems like the Lightning Infusion and Pierce. As most of our build is made around the Permafrost bolts and grenades, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their damage, while the rest of our powerful filler skills we can use until our main rotation comes back up. Next up we have our passive skill tree, so we want to start at the projectile damage node and go like this until we get these 3 notable nodes. Then next we work towards here and get these 2 more nodes. Then afterwards go like this and get that entire right side. Then now keep going down until this circle, and then we take the right and get that whole right side, starting with instant reload and all the way up till wasting. Then now we come back to this path and get that whole circle. And then from here we just keep going down and take whatever node you want, as long as you follow this path exactly in the way that you see here. To simplify my decision making, then basically we want to prioritize instant reload first, because reload speed will give us the biggest build upgrade, so we want to get it first. Then also, once you have explosive grenade and explosive shot skills, then start taking the grenade node and grenade reload speed. Then next our path down to the crossbow wheel at the bottom is made for more damage, and the Leatherbound's gauntlet and the general's binding is for more defense. And then finally for the rest of our nodes, they are meant for once you go ignite, which will increase our damage and other ailments. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the advanced Dayat crossbow, with stats like the critical, speed and min and max physical damage. For prefixes we have a load and additional bolt, increased physical damage, add to physical damage and add to fire damage. Then for helmet we have the shielded helm, with stats like the armor and evasion. Then for chest we have the advanced explorer armor with the armor and evasion. Then for belt we have the mail belt with reduced flask charges. Then for gloves we got the bolstered mitts with armor. Then for boots we are using the stacked sabotons with the armor and evasion. Then for our first ring we got the ruby ring with fire resistance, while on the second one we got the sapphire ring with cold resistance. And then finally for the amulet we get the jade amulet with dexterity. As the game just launched, so this is a starter setup, which should be more of an example with stats and prefixes to look for. Your weapon will be the most important upgrade to look for, so prioritize flat damage of any type. Specifically, the physical roll will be the most important, as your skills themselves will do a lot of conversion. Also, once you start investing more points into the passive skill tree, then you will want to look for stats like the flat physical and flat fire damage. Attack speed is also helpful as it improves your reload speed. For defenses, make sure you're regularly updating the base type of your gear, So look for increased armor on gloves to get the best use of our leather-bound gauntlet node, which gives 1 evasion per every 1 armor, and then go with armor/evasion hybrid for all the other items. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. So for bossing on large rare enemies, we want to start the rotation by using the Permafrost bolts, which freezes them and gives us the full bonus from the frost fire. Then afterwards, we drop explosive grenades and either way wait for the fuse or hit them with the detonator skill, which does not have a consume freeze support on it. And for this, in this rotation, I'm using the explosive shot. And then from here, we want to finish it off with the high velocity rounds and or galvanic shards. And then the rest of our skills are filler spells, which we can use until we get back our main DPS rotation.